Hi. Oh, sorry.
So Royce, so you're up here now. That's so cool. You moved up the state.
Yes, and congrats on your beautiful wedding.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just met it before. Yeah.
I was like, she's so hardcore. She came all the way from Fort Myers. Is what I thought.
She lives here there. She lives here. So I just got here 2 weeks ago, and you guys meet me.
That's awesome. She's very conservative.
I just got the job 2 weeks ago.
Do me a favor, send an email to my legislative office. I'm Tyler Sawyer, just gave the last one out.
Oh.
This is my house district.
You don't carry a prank. I brought the snack this day because I knew that.
That's right. I should be in my room, but I just haven't had time.
Text, you got my cell phone?
Yes.
Text me and I'll text you his cell phone.
I have your receipt.
Oh, okay. I think you can. Yeah. No, I put it in the shop. I guess I better get up.
Yeah, I think
All right.
this sounds good. We just hold them down like some quarters. I said we're probably the safest place in Park County. How are you? Yeah, it's okay. Too cold, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Ladies and gentlemen! In all seriousness, I need everybody to give me your attention. Everybody be quiet for just a minute. Give me a quiet. Please, we're getting ready to start. I want you to know, God bless you, Brevard County. We are at capacity. They are happy to close the door. We're standing room only. So if you're a standee, please clear out this area up here, except for the folks that are sitting here, and line up down the sides and in the back. By the way, my name is Bob White. I'm the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida. Now, this is the Second Amendment Gun Rights Preservation Forum, right? You know what I'm seeing when I look out here tonight? An extraordinary example of patriots expressing their First Amendment rights to protect their Second Amendment rights. We've got the right to publicly assemble, and we've got the right to petition our government for a redress of our grievances, and we're doing all three of those things tonight. So thank you all very much for being here. We're very excited about our event, and it is going to be great. So, this time I've got Rabbi Sandy Olshansky. Where is Sandy? Sandy Olshansky, a rabbi, is going to give us the invocation, and we're going to follow that with Susan Trump leading Susan Trump. Susan Hodges, who is the president of the Trump Club, our co-sponsor on this event, is going to come up and she's going to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. So, if you'll all stand, please, for the invocation from Rabbi Olshansky.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu. Our God, God of our fathers and mothers, we thank you for the freedom we enjoy as citizens of these United States. We thank you also for the brave men and women who have risked their lives and given their lives in our armed services to defend our freedom, as well as those who are in harm's way at this very moment. We ask your blessing on our President, Donald Trump, our Vice President, Michael Pence, and on government officials at all levels, federal, state, and local, who exercise just and rightful authority. We pray that you give them the wisdom, strength, and courage to serve their constituents ably and well. Inspire them to do what is good and honorable, even when it is not easy. God, we hope and pray for the ideal time spoken of by your prophet Isaiah, when the lion will lie down with the lamb and men will beat their swords into plowshares. But we know that we are not there yet. Until then, we need to be able to defend ourselves. We pray that you will help us to be steadfast in preserving our rights to defend ourselves and our families. God, the Second Amendment of our Constitution assures us the means to fulfill your commandment in the book of Leviticus that we must not stand idly by the blood of a neighbor. We know, as ancient rabbis taught in the Talmud, that sometimes this requires us to take the life of an attacker in order to save the lives of intended victims. We must be able to do so. Help us to resist the voices that would entice Americans to limit the rights guaranteed by our Second Amendment in return for the illusion of safety. As you girded King David with strength for the battle, we pray you will gird us. As you delivered him from enemies and men of violence, we pray you will help us continue to have the means to deliver ourselves. Amen. Amen.
Okay, before Susan leads us in the invocation, in the pledge, I want to make you aware of a custom that we have within the Republican Liberty Caucus. In our meetings, we conclude the Pledge of Allegiance with what we refer to as the Patriot Pledge, where we pledge our allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. So at the end of the pledge, if you want to participate in that with us, you'll hear several of us saying that, and you can just join right in. So I'm going to turn it over now to Susan Hodgers, the president of the club, to give the pledge. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. Really quick, I just want to say a big thank you to Bob White and the RLC for helping put this together. I think this is an amazing event. Thank you all for being here. And I don't see him, because there's so many people, is Keith Rigler here. I saw him. He's in the back selling everything. And today is his birthday, so you can probably get a round of applause. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you.
All right, now, we've got a great program, and many of you have bought raffle tickets. We're going to go ahead and we're going to handle the raffle right now. So Steve, come on up here. And why don't we have two things to raffle off. So why don't you let Kendra draw one of the tickets and let Wayne draw the other one. The first ticket will be for the larger set, double set of prints in the back, the two larger ones. The second ticket will be for the two smaller ones that are right above. So,
all right, the first number, which is Bob said for the bottom two, right? Wow, sorry, you can see right in the glasses. 3, 4, 9, 7, 6, 5, 1. We'll get them to you here right quick. Promise. All right. I know you won't let us forget. Sheriff Ivey.
All right, I'm pulling it. Here we go. Wayne Ivey.
Good job.
I'll hold it out here so you
Yeah,
can
I know exactly right. 3, 4, 9, 7, 7, 4, 5.
Me!
All right, we appreciate all of your help. We'll get those right away. I'll go get them.
thank you very much, Steve, and thank you for Kendra and Wayne pulling the tickets for us, and congratulations to the winner. Okay, I have a few very brief opening remarks because we've got a power-packed panel here. We've got Bill Mick to lead the discussion. So I am going to be brief, and the rabbi touched on one of the things that I was going to open with in these remarks, and that is that, yes, it's billed as a Second Amendment preservation, gun rights preservation form, and we're going to get into all the technicalities of that. But at a foundational, fundamental reason that we gathered here tonight is because the same God that gave us life, gave us liberty, and gave us, and coming along with that, the absolute right to do whatever it takes, with whatever power necessary, to defend our lives and our liberty and our property. Amen. So at a fundamental level, that's why we're here. But I can tell you this is one of 8 of these events that are taking place around the state of Florida this month. We had the idea, when I say we, I mean the board of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, had the idea back in October that we needed to organize something like this because we could see what was coming at us in Tallahassee, and we could see what was coming at us in the coming legislative session, and we could see what was coming at us with this group down in South Florida called BON, Ban Assault Weapons Now. Many of you know who they are. They're the ones that are pushing the constitutional amendment to try to get an amendment on the ballot in 2020. Fortunately, it looks like they won't make it, but here's what you need to know. Every petition signature that they have collected so far, they will be able to carry those over and continue their quest. And if they don't get it on the ballot this time, you can bet they'll be back in 2022. But guess what? So will we. That's why we're doing this, because we need to build a resistance against that kind of thinking and against that kind of action. So with that, I'll say just one more thing. It may be that you will hear some criticism of Republicans tonight. You may find that strange coming from a Republican organization like ours. and the Trump Club. But if you look at this banner right here, you'll see the Republican Liberty Caucus down at the bottom. It says, the conscience of the Republican Party. And what we mean by that is that we have never hesitated to hold our party accountable for their actions and to hold our elected Republican officials accountable for their actions as well. So if you hear some criticisms like Senate President Bill Galvano, a Republican who's responsible for SB 7026 and who's now seeking more gun control legislation, a Republican who, by the way, took $500,000 from Michael Bloomberg. So if you hear some criticism over that, it's because somebody's got to hold these people accountable. So, but then I do have a few quick introductions that I want to make because we don't, we always like to do this to recognize different folks that are here. There's some folks that came here from out of town. Randy Ross is somewhere in the back. Did you see the Trump 2020 truck out front? Randy's from Orange County. He's on the National Finance Committee for Donald Trump. Thank you, Randy. All right, we've got Cheryl Lano is running the voter registration in the back. Okay? Change the registration if you want to go from independent to Republican. I'm assuming we don't have any Democrats here tonight, but if we do, God bless you for being here. By the way, Cheryl came over from Lake County to do that. Where's Tori Renzo? Stand up, Tori.
Yeah,
Tori is new to Brevard County. She just got hired on as the Brevard County Regional Director, the Brevard County Regional Director for the Donald Trump re-election campaign. So, we have some elected officials here tonight, and man, when you start doing this, you're bound to miss somebody. I try not to. If I did, please forgive me. I know Christine Znardi is here. County Commissioner Christine Znardi. I know the County Union Mayor of Overton is here somewhere. Twin Sports, Todd Ellis. Public Defender Blaze Titus is here somewhere. Property Appraiser Dana Blixley is here. We've got School Board Member Ken Deskovich here. Let's see. We have Sarah Stokel, Titusville, came down from Titusville City Council. And we've got State Representative Titus Roy right over here. And just so you know, Tyler is a co-sponsor on the constitutional carry bill that Representative Anthony Sabatini has introduced for this year's legislative session. If I missed anyone, Jeff Bailey, where is he? There he is in the back. All right, so we thank all of you for being here. It is going to be a great event. It's going to be my pleasure at this point to turn it over to Bill Mick. Bill's going to introduce all of the panelists and give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about themselves. And then he's going to guide the rest of the evening, the panel discussion, the Q&A, and all that good stuff. Most everybody probably knows Bill, the host of the Bill Mick radio show that airs Monday through Friday on WMMB, 1240 on your AM dial. He's been doing that now for, gosh, I think 20 years. Pushing 20 years now that he's done that. He's a great conservative voice here in Clark County. Bill, just so that you know, spent 17 years, I think it was 17 years in West Virginia on the police force. Okay. He also is a Air National Guard patrol. I got that right. I remembered that. His youngest son is a member of the Brevard County Sheriff's Office. So, guy doesn't really need any introduction, but I think I handled that pretty well. So, Bill, come on up.
My family tells me I don't need a microphone or a radio. Glad you're all here, and it's an honor to be part of this event tonight. Let's get right to it, get this panel introduced, and then let's get to the discussion because it's an important one. Well, Bob, you've already introduced yourself. No, well, then make sure that microphone is ready for everybody else, if you will. They can be able to speak where they have to pass that around. Close enough, there we go. Yes. That's Kendra Parrish. She's an attorney with the Parrish Law Group. Kendra, you're involved in red flag law defense, I guess, for people who've had their weapons taken, involved in that. Tell us about yourself and what got you into this and what you're doing here now.
Sure. Again, my name is Kendra Parrish. I'm out of Orlando, but I do work across the state. I don't go into the Panhandle. There's no real easy way to get up there. But yeah, I started working on these red flag laws the moment when they came out because so many of them stem from Baker Acts, and I'm a Baker Act defense attorney. I'm one of about two in the state of Florida. And so the very first one in Orange County I handled, we won that one. We defeated the RPO in that one. There were breathless headlines, but I found there were so many interesting issues in this law. You know, the Second Amendment, you've got Fourth Amendment issues, First Amendment issues. What's the threat? The threat you might not be a threat to somebody else. And so, and obviously due process. And so I'm very glad to be here. And any questions you have afterward, please feel free to contact my office and I'll answer questions. So.
Kendra, we're glad you're here. Thank you so much. I don't guess we need to go to
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here, brother. And thank you guys for doing this and putting this together. I have the honor of serving as your sheriff. And equally, I have the honor of serving with 1,500 incredible men and women of our agency that are out there knocking it out of the park every day to keep you safe. They're the ones that do all the work. They're the ones that are out there putting their lives on the line. So I would ask you to please give them a big round of applause. As most of you in this room know, you're never going to find a sheriff anywhere in this country that stands up for the Second Amendment more than I do. I believe the Second Amendment is the military of the Constitution. They are there to protect it. And I tell you that we as a nation have to stand up right now. We as a nation have to stand up and start doing exactly what we're doing tonight, being vocal about the protection of our constitutional rights. Because let there be no doubt about it, what we cherish in this country is under attack. And I am telling you that from the bottom of my heart. I believe that it's not only our Second Amendment that's under attack, I believe our entire Constitution is under attack. We have to stop being the silent majority and start being the vocal majority. Because look around the world. Every person in this room is a professional. Every person in this room is someone that cherishes our great nation, our great rights and guarantees, and we go about things in a very professional manner. But we have to start going about telling people these are our rights and you are not taking them from me. We're not going to sit idly by anymore and let you take another single right. If you look at what's happened, from not being able to pray in our schools, to people kneeling for our flag, to people that don't think I have the same right to freedom of speech as they do. We have to stop it. And the way we stop it is by making sure we're sending the right people to Washington and the right people to Tallahassee. That's how we stop it. We stand up for the Constitution and we stand up for the American flag. That's what we do. So I appreciate everybody. I'm going to leave the moderator, but I want to ask one question tonight because I don't think I'll ever get another opportunity to do this question with the response I'm going to get. How many of you have your gun with you tonight?
Funny you went there, Sheriff, because when you were done speaking, one thing I was going to say is, in 83 or 85, Chuck Norris made a movie called The Code of Silence. And in that movie, there was a scene where all the cops were together in the cop car, and these two idiots come in to rob the bar, and the next scene is all the cops in the bar with guns pointed at the bad guys. I can imagine this room's a lot like that tonight. And I think there are also other people in the room who are smart enough not to raise their hands when someone asks if they're carrying a gun. So, just saying.
That happened in Toledo, Ohio in 1977. Two thugs went in to try to rob Jakey's bar in the middle of a cop shift party.
I love it. Let's get back to it. Before I introduce this next panelist, I've got to tell you a little bit that I know about. I met Anthony Sabatini here in this room for the first time this evening. I talked to him on Saturday for 20 minutes on the telephone. He was doing his due diligence over controversy surrounding me even being here. And he was asking me questions about events that had brought that controversy to play. He asked the questions, he asked the hard questions. He demanded quality answers. And at the end of that, he determined to be here because he evaluated what was in front of him and made his decision accordingly. That, my friends, is the kind of representative we need. Anthony Sabatini, why are you here tonight? What are you doing?
Bill, that's a really good question. Looking at this crowd of bleeding heart conservatives, much like myself, I'm wondering why I don't come to Brevard County a little bit more often, to be honest. But to answer your question seriously, I'm here to do the only thing I was ever elected to do, which is to protect, defend, and exclaim everything that's in our Constitution, and that's it. My name's Anthony Sabatini. I represent District 32. That's Lake County, Florida, just down the road. And much like Brevard, we are a very pro-Second Amendment county. So much so that when I was running for office, it became basically the issue that I think defined my candidacy and then what I decided to do once I got to Tallahassee a year ago. And when I got to Tallahassee, I basically started by saying I needed to file some very good pro-Second Amendment legislation. So the first bill I actually filed was campus carry. For those who are not familiar, it's a bill that says the 20,000 acres of public land in Florida that we call colleges and universities, your Second Amendment doesn't stop just because you crossed into that public land. But it only took a few more months of wondering and looking at that bill and talking to my constituents, talking to voters around the state for me to wonder, well, what the hell am I doing anything less than just constitutional carry itself? The idea of a permitless open carry bill here in the state of California. So once I stopped and actually listened to my constituents, I realized what they wanted. They wanted Florida to do what 16 states around the country have already gone to open and permitless carry. The types of, in my opinion, there is no gun law, no gun regulation that squares with the Second Amendment other than constitutional carry itself. Period. Although the open carry portion of the bill had been filed in the past, constitutional carry, which is open carry plus permitless carry, no concealed carry permit, had never been filed in Florida before. So I'm proud of the fact that I got to file that for the first time. I'm proud that State Representative Tyler Roy, one of the best, boldest conservative voices in the Florida House, is a co-sponsor, and I'm looking forward to fighting it and explaining and talking a little bit more about it. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Very good. Thank
you. Representative Sabatini's right is a voice that you'll know if you don't know the face. His name is Royce Bartlett. He hosts Shooting Straight on my radio station, WMMV, Saturday afternoons from 2 to 4. I first came to meet Royce as a potential advertiser for the radio station, was going to have me endorse his product on my show. I talked to him for 5 minutes. I pulled the salesman aside. I said, forget an endorsement. This guy needs to be doing a radio show. And it's been history ever since. He's a phenomenal host and a knowledgeable man. Royce Parkland. Tell folks why you're here.
First, a huge thank you to each and every one of you for being exactly the American citizens our founders envisioned by showing up in places like this, voicing your support for the Constitution and being willing to fight for it. That's what our founders envisioned. Thank you all right there. Thank you for being civic-minded and being active in this fight. Yes, we're using our First Amendment now. I pray we don't have to go safeties off, but we need to present a unified front here. And we need to present an armed unified front Don't mistake what I'm saying, that I'm looking to start the, Civil War 2.0. That's the last thing on this planet that I want. But I tell you what's worse than that is yielding to the desires of our enemies in our midst, letting ourselves be subjugated and giving up rights that our children will not enjoy if we do so. This is the supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States. That tells me any law that contradicts the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, especially according to the 14th Amendment, where no state shall enact or enforce any laws that contradict or contravene the right, the God-given rights enumerated in the Constitution. And I agree with my other panelists here that every gun law since 1934 is illegal. Yes, I said illegal. I don't like leasing my rights back from the state. That's a right I was born with. You don't get to take it from me and say, oh, you don't have that right, but we'll sell it back to you on an expiring permit if you want. No, thank you. As far as I'm concerned, from sea to shining sea is my lawful carry zone.
Yes.
Before we pass it back to Bill, I just wanted to say one thing, two things actually. The first is, I don't know how many of you saw the article in the paper over the weekend about our organization having passed a resolution of non-compliance. Yeah. It was, of course, Royce that wrote that. I don't know if you found that in the article or not. We need to fill in the and then finally, it's pretty clear that while Royce has a voice for radio, right? Bill clearly has a face for radio.
You got that from the sheriff, right? You have big shoulders, Sheriff. And a big dog. Let's get right to the discussion, and we'll let you panelists kick it around amongst yourselves. I'm not going to pick one to talk and say you've got 2 minutes. This is a discussion to be had by people who are knowledgeable in the issue. The state of Virginia has proposed banning and confiscation of firearms, and as we discussed that on the show this morning, they are proposing to allocate millions of dollars for confiscation and arrest the people who defy their assault weapons ban and confiscation law. They are answering that with sanctuary counties and cities. I don't like the word sanctuary. It makes it sound like you're hiding from something you've done wrong. How about a constitutional county or city? I like that better. But how do you see that playing out here in the state of Florida? What do you see as the issues? And Sheriff, we'll start with you. You'll be on the front lines of defense.
Yeah, so first of all, what's going on in Virginia is just absolutely crazy. And it didn't just start with the push on taking guns. It started with the anti-gun people bailing tons of money into those elections to be able to put people in place to do that. And I think that's one of the things that we have to be very careful about. And it goes back to what I said earlier about let's make sure we send the right people to Washington and to Tallahassee on Oregon. But when you look at the aspect of sanctuary cities, a great friend of mine, Scott Jenkins, is one of the sheriffs that's on the front line up there fighting that. I have a little bit of a different opinion about sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities as in response to the Second Amendment. And that is, I understand why they're doing it, but to me, the Constitution says that the United States of America is a two-way sanctuary. And so when we start going and doing county ordinances and other things that say, you know, we're a two-way sanctuary, what we're really doing is saying the Constitution is not strong enough. And so for me, I kind of like the idea that County Commissioner Christine Isnardi gave me, and that is, rather than doing a resolution that says we're a two-way sanctuary, let's do one that says Brevard County, above everything else, recognizes the United States Constitution as the most powerful. Hell yeah! What my friends and others are doing in Virginia, and they are in position where they have to. Two things come to my mind. One, we're in Brevard County, and I'm not worried about this place having to become a 2A sanctuary because we get it, all right? We understand it. But the second part of that is we have to be careful not to weaken the fabric of the United States Constitution. It is the strongest document. What we have to do is just say, this is our Constitution, this is our mantra for our country, and you're not messing with it, and everything in it is protected. So that's my position.
Thanks, Wayne.
It's hard to follow up on that. I think, right now, because everything is hypothetical, it might happen, it might not, I think right now the sanctuary city push is more of a political statement than anything else. Obviously, the Attorney General issued an opinion saying, well, it doesn't mean anything. Well, it does mean something. I think it means a lot, and it means the same thing that all of you people gathered here tonight means. It means that a lot of people care, and they're not going to take it if you try to do it. So that would just be my final word to add on to what the sheriff said.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I just wanted to follow up on something that Wayne said. That whole gun grab legislation, confiscation, arrest people, potential of flooding the streets of Virginia, coming about because of all the money that got poured into Virginia by all of these anti-gun groups. It's the same thing is happening here. I already mentioned the $500,000 that our current Senate President took from Michael Bloomberg. The Senate President that's following him is a guy named Wilton Simpson. Wilton Simpson took $250,000 from a guy that runs a PAC down in Southeast Florida. It's also an anti-gun PAC down there. So, and that is going to escalate. That is just going to keep escalating. People need to be aware that that's what we're up against. So when you see, when we talk later in the evening about all the bad legislation that's already taken place here in Florida and the bad legislation that there's a lot of good stuff that Anthony and others are doing. There's a lot of bad stuff that could potentially come our way. Just keep in mind that follow the money. Okay, so the amount of money that's being spent to influence and to literally put people in office, it's become obscene in the state of Florida. And so we need to also be checking that on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Anthony Sabatini, you're going to face this in the House. What are you seeing already, and how do you fight it?
Well, appreciate the question. It's probably the most relevant question we'll deal with tonight. So I'll start a little philosophical. In politics, there's no stagnation. You're either on offense or you're on defense. We are on defense right now. Unfortunately, that is the situation in Tallahassee that some folks have created. They passed gun control before I was there, and the narrative is that more gun control is coming. That's why I've done what I've done. Filed gun control bills, try to frame the narrative, show them the facts, show them the evidence, and go on offense. And it's up to everybody in this room here tonight to light up your social media, light up the media, light up everybody you know, register that person you know is not registered, and get them blowing up every single phone line to every senator and every House member, not just your district, not just Brevard, but the whole state, letting them know that this issue is the single issue that matters. Raise your hand if you're a single issue voter. You really do consider yourself that way, right? It's a very single issue voter. You know that the Second Amendment defines your vote no matter what other issues are at the table. It's not a small category. What's happening, I think, in Tallahassee and other places is Republicans are forgetting that a large demographic of their own voters, this is their number one issue. It's not something on a silly piece of paper that they fill out. Okay, I got 4 or 5 issues, taxes, this and that. Here's the second vote. No, it's in the Constitution, it's the Bill of Rights, it's fundamental. If more Republicans know that, then they're going to act accordingly. I think they forgot that 2 years ago when gun control passed. So to answer your question a roundabout way, we need to stay on offense in every single thing we do. And if the Virginia, first of all, they chose a horrible state to do that in, because for Southern Virginia, very good friends there. My uncle was a police chief there. It is deep red. That was a stupid place to start this battle.
Well, and those counties will be welcome in my native land of West Virginia. We already defined them.
Not to go on forever, but it's going to end badly there, and we're going to realize the hypocrisy of the left and the hypocrisy of the Democrats. They claim to want to stop violence. They're starting violence with this confiscation.
Quick follow-up before you let the mic go, and then hand it to Royce when you're done. Hang on, Sheriff.
I just want to say something to your comment.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing ever going to be bad enough to make me go to West Virginia.
Question comes up then, if law can be passed by a legislative body, it can be taken away by the same body. Why not a constitutional amendment to the state of Florida to make open carry, constitutional carry the law of the
I
land. Would that be a way to go?
I totally 100% support that. You know, it is a heavy lift to amend the Constitution. We've seen these liberal things come in
The
the
same
mail.
pregnant pigs and 4-year-old pre-K and the things that we've done.
It's true. You know, state constitutions do get amended quite often. That's why we put the brakes on last year in House Bill 5, where we said if you're going to gather petitions to throw crazy liberal stuff in there like they do every year after year, we're going to make it harder. No more paying them per petition. No more unlimited out-of-state money, etc. So it's I support that route, but it's the tougher route.
Sure, I understand. Royce Bartlett, your thoughts here? Virginia and Illinois. Well, I get 3 hours a day, you get 2, so go ahead.
I'm glad for you. First, I like what Mr. Abraham Lincoln said, Mr. 16th President of the United States. He said, "We the people are the rightful masters of the Congress and the courts." So who's the final authority?
We are.
We are, the Constitution and the people. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar to understand the Constitution. How many of y'all understand the Second Amendment exactly how it's written? First chapter in the book of Duh, right? Pretty easy and plain to read, but unfortunately we've got people in high places who are constitutionally dyslexic, just like the good old boys up there in Virginia, Governor Northam and all his little commie cronies up there, and those are the kind of people we're dealing with. If we, the people, are the rightful masters, that's something we need to continue to propagate. Look, the left propagates lie upon lie upon lie upon lie as they attack our rights, do they not? All right, let's tell the truth upon the truth upon the truth upon the truth and be bold about it. I mean, be right up. If they get in your face with a lie, you get in the face with the truth. You counter lies with truth. And again, this is why we use our First Amendment to try to save our Second Amendment. But we're going to take this country back peacefully. We've got to be talking about it. We've got to be constantly educating our sons and our daughters and our friends and our family. I know some of them just flat out block you out and won't listen to you. That's fine. Go on to somebody else. But don't just talk to your representatives and a lot of them guys get bought out by Bloomberg and stuff. We've got a so-called Republican up in Florida right now. He's the head of the, what is he up there, Anthony? Mr. Galvano. What position is he? President of the Senate, who has pulled a Judas and accepted $500,000 from Mr. Bloomberg, as we already spoke about. Some people, they're going to be that way, and we cannot count on the Congress and or the courts to always be constitutional. That's something we have to do. And also, this also goes back to, we need to let these people know that they are not the final authority, and if we decide to stand up and present a defensive front to them, best thing you can do is back down before we start boiling some tar and cutting up some pillows, if you know what I mean.
Very good, Royce. Thank you. Speaking of such things and related, Senator Tom Lee, who is running the gun control stuff in the Senate, has said that this gun control stuff is the issue of our time. There's no chance that the Florida Senate's not going to try to enact more gun control. Let's talk about how we fight that. And Anthony, let's start with you. You'll be leading the battle in the House.
Well, thank you so much for the question. It's an amazing question. We know that no matter what happens out of that special committee that the Senate created, it's going to be bad because it's a committee on gun control. They've already hurt us and failed us because, not to geek out on you too much, but there's such a thing called the Overton Window. All right, so what they've done is they've created the perception that all this violence, all these bad things that are happening are our fault, us. We're the bad ones. That's the perception that the Senate's created by creating this committee. We need to stop law-abiding citizens because, their access to guns is what's creating these violent incidents. They've already failed us. What we need to do is challenge that narrative already. Like I said, you can do it through social media, you can do it through phone calls, you can do it by allowing them to know our numbers and the severity of how much we care about this issue, and that filing anything would be bad. I mean, you don't know what's going to come out of committee. It could be something as ridiculous as confiscation. Way more than likely, it's going to be something like a background check. The House is going to be against it. I do have faith that the current leadership in the House won't expand any more gun control. But I know for one thing is more important than that. We need to make sure they know that everybody in this room knows that we're never going to be for that. They do have the perception, a lot of people tell us do have the perception, that a large group of Republican voters want gun control. Nothing could be less true than that. It's the same pollsters that are polling these Trump numbers, right? You see these numbers, Donald Trump's going to lose in the landslide. What was it? 91% chance of the Clinton victory, said the New York Times in their super scientific metric poll. The same people are polling on guns. It's a sensitive issue. They're polling on heartstrings. They're not polling it right. It doesn't reflect the average Floridian. And people know that, and they understand that, and politicians actually, I think it'll give politicians in Tallahassee more courage to stand against those. So the best thing we can do.
You think there are politicians in Tallahassee, Republican House members and Senate members, that are courageous and strong enough to carry the day there?
I think the Senate is in a worse-off place. It was difficult for me to find a Senate sponsor because of the fact that the air in the room is on the side of gun control. Right. And I would say that should be the focus of every citizen.
Right. Sheriff, you're going to be the guy who has to face down Tallahassee should those types of laws be put in play. I know your heart, I know your mind, I know your willingness to defend the people of this county. How you handle that dealing with something coming from the state level?
Well, the first thing is we fight it on the front. We keep it from happening, and putting pressure on our legislators. Anthony's doing a great job in the House, and one of the things that I will say, just absolute, is the House has done a good job at protecting our citizens the last few sessions, the last few times. The Senate, I don't know what's happened up there. I don't know if they all hit their head on a beam or something, but it's gotten to a point where they are looking to put citizens' lives at risk, because not only are the gun measures that they're talking about taking away our constitutional rights, but the Senate is hard pressed. Senator Brandis, call him every day and tell him to open his eyes, because he's wanting to go soft on crime, because we're at an all-time low of the crime rate in Florida. So his idea is, now's the time to go soft on crime. My idea is, now's the time to put our boot firmly on the throat of crime and choke it out. Thankfully, the Florida Sheriff's Association, all the sheriffs, the Chiefs of Police Association, our prosecutor, Phil Archer, and his team have all been fighting this, and the saving grace has been the House. It has been the House on multiple levels. So I think the answer to your question was, we got to fight it on the front end, and then if we don't succeed there, we'll be standing ready. The Sheriff's Office is the first line of defense for our citizens. We are going to stand ready. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and I can tell you, I will be unwavering in that. I'm willing to bet that I'm the only person in this room, now I might lose this bet, but I'm willing to bet I'm the only person in this room that has the Constitution tattooed on their arm. So, if somebody else has got that, let's hook up, because I just want to see it, see what it looks like. That's how we got to fight it.
Because I love my friend Sheriff Ivey, I won't hit him with a joke going back like he's been doing me. Kendra, as an attorney, you will be tasked with defending any of us who might be subjected to this type of law. What kind of grounds do you see constitutionally that you would feel are the strongest to fight on? What do you think could be successful in that kind of environment?
Oh, okay. So, just as background, and I'm sure most of you guys know it, but after Parkland happened, it was within about 3 weeks you have the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, right? And then embedded within it was the Risk Protection Order Act, which creates this new thing that procedurally tracks like domestic violence injunction. In that, the petitioner, which is law enforcement, can get the ex parte, meaning there's no notice to you before they get it. They just go get it. In fact, it's usually, in my experience, it's a phone call to the judge. It's about 20 seconds. Guy looks crazy. The judge is good enough for me, and so they're granted about 99% of the time. So I never thought anything like that would pass in Florida to begin with. It was passed so hastily. It doesn't seem that anybody went through a legal or legislative review because there's just bad language. The strongest ground language to challenge it is that it's just so poorly drafted, right? It's vague. What's a significant danger, right? How is the court even supposed, what's significant? I mean, and this is one of the arguments that I've made actually in the second DCA, which encompasses Polk and Tampa and whatnot. Significant has one of two meanings. You've got something like clinical significance, right? Just enough to be noticed, and then you've got significant meaning a lot, a great deal. I mean, it's inherently ambiguous. No court knows what it means. You might as well take that word out and you'd still be doing the same thing, right? And then you also have case-by-case issues, but between judges, are they going to allow in hearsay? You know, are we just going to deal with the neighbor coming in and giving a letter to the judge? That's not how most cases track. And are we going to give people lawyers if they can't afford one? We're talking about an enumerated constitutional right. So as far as future legislation goes, if anybody had talked to me after having handled about 2 dozen of these cases, I could have told them how they could fix the law if they're not going to get rid of it. The reporters somehow got my number, but the legislators haven't called me. I've got suggestions, but I don't know what they're planning.
Bob, your group has a voice in Tallahassee. You're there during session every year. You've become a respected voice up there. What avenues do you have to preempt this from happening or to have influence should it occur?
That's a great question, and I want to reiterate the fact that with our experience over many, many years going back and forth to Tallahassee, the House has never been the issue. We've been able to get good gun legislation passed in the House. Woo!
The house is coming down.
So much for command strips. But the House has never been the problem. The problem has always been on the Senate side, and it always will be. It's unbelievable the difference between the two. So the House has always been the bulwark that has stood against bad bills, except for this last time around. And so, we put up every year we have someone that we pay good money to be there in Tallahassee to represent us. He's the only, quote, truly liberty lobbyist in the business up there. He pretty much lives hand to mouth all year long to be able to do what he does, because trust me when I tell you, there are no wealthy special interests and wealthy donors that are wanting to fork out the big bucks for a liberty lobbyist, as they're willing to fork out the big bucks to protect their business or their corporation or their special interest, whatever it might be. So it's a challenge. It's always a challenge. And one of the things that irritates me the most about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill is this. What happened in Parkland is the result of a failure of government at every level. At the local level, at the county level with the school board and with the county sheriff's office, at the state level, as well as at the federal level with the FBI and their failure. And so what they did in Tallahassee was they put this big bill together that literally tried to divert all the attention away from the fact that it was their fault that this happened and not yours, and they tried to blame it on you. And that just irritates the hell out of me. And it's one of the reasons that we need to push back as hard as we possibly can. And we've got some action items for you that we'll talk about at the end of the meeting for ways that you'll be able to get involved and help in that crusade.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just add to what Bob's saying. I think that the best way to summarize what happened on Parkland and what we see happen on a lot of other fronts as well is government has a tendency to react. What we need our government to do is to respond. There's a huge difference between those two. And what you saw in Parkland was a knee-jerk reaction. That's all it was. And that knee-jerk reaction created more problems. What they should have done is responded to it, held those that were responsible for the failures accountable for their failures, and then said, okay, if all of this had been in place, if everybody had done exactly what they should have done, would Parkland have happened? And I think if you go back and add all that up, you're going to see, like I do, that Parkland should have never happened. And so they're trying to fix what happened on this end when they ought to hold those accountable that didn't do what they had the authority to do then.
Sure, if you'll pass that
Quick follow-up to what Lane just said. Is anybody here familiar with a man named Andrew Pollock? Yeah. Andrew Pollock is the father of Meadow Pollock. Meadow is one of the students that was killed in Parkland. And Andrew just wrote a book entitled Why Meadow Died. And in the book, he basically says, Meadow didn't die because of guns. Meadow died because of liberal policies and liberal legislation and people that were unwilling to confront
the real dangers that exist out there in a meaningful way. That's why Meadow died. That's why all 17 of those people died. Not because we have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, but because they were failed by these liberal policies.
Royce Bartlett, should the legislator not be able to stop the legislation from happening? Should the sheriff not be able to defend us from being arrested for that? Should the, I know, it's hypothetical, Wayne, should the attorney not be able to keep us from having this arrest? And should group efforts in Tallahassee not work? It's down to the individual, and you talk to those individuals every weekend. What do you see should that happen?
We should, I guess to answer that hypothetical with another, does that mean that we should be totally at the government's mercy and when they declare us guilty, I mean, or guilty of a future crime, these red flag laws especially, it's built into the framework of our Constitution to be defended against charges from the government. Everything about the Constitution is, if you think about it, is a restriction upon government and their power. It's kind of like when y'all start a campfire. You ever been camping? All right, one or two of you. When you make a fire, do you not put containment around it so it doesn't spread? Government is a fire. That came right from the mouth of George Washington. Government is a fire. It has to be contained. And that's why they surrounded it with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to keep it contained. Fire must be tended to and watched over. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, we stopped watching over our government and they broke out of that containment. And that's where the problem has become. The Constitution in and of itself is a restriction against government. Look at the Second Amendment. That's a direct prohibition against government. That's not the expression of the right. It's simply saying, government, you will not touch that. You will not infringe that. You will not violate that. No, no, no. Apparently the government says, well, I'm pro-Second Amendment. Exactly. Just like so many other people that we've talked to ourselves. That's why I'm such a staunch constitutionalist. We should always have the right to trial by jury. I could go off on jury nullification right now, but I'm not going to.
We don't have
trial by jury and always be defended against charges from our government, whether it be local, municipal, state, federal. We always should be defended by our government.
Representative from Sabatini, you had some thoughts. I saw you reaching for a mic. Go ahead.
So when the red flag law occurred, I thought, and I was a pretty young guy, I'm 31 years old, the first thing I focused on was the 18 to 20-year-old part. And I was like, that's got to be the most egregious part. And I was so offended by that because I joined the Florida Army National Guard at 19, and so this would have obviously stripped me of my rights. Still in the National Guard 10 years later, and I just thought, I kept visioning the guy going to war and his wife and at the house, and they're not allowed to own a firearm. That was so sick and disgusting. But as time went by, and I dug into the bill and actually read that very boring and badly written statute, I realized the worst part was the red flag law. Yeah. That was the biggest perversion of the justice you could possibly ever offer as a wise legislation, and that it completely and totally turns the Constitution on its head. And worst of all, that it creates a principle that can be adopted in other circumstances. How far are we from people saying, okay, what he said, we're talking about the First Amendment here, what he said was offensive, so let's go ahead, petition a judge, strip him of his ability to speak, and then he can come and actually prove to us by clear and convincing evidence that he should be allowed to say that. I mean, how far are we off from that? This politically correct side that we're aiming at. So if the politicians who are looking at this and voting on this understand how bad it is, back to the Overton Window, back to the idea that they could take this principle and apply it to the entire Bill of Rights, it's frightening and insane. Secondly, I'll say on that, and the reason I know that the red flag law is the worst, is because look how much it's been abused. We have some great sheriffs in this state, like in Lake County, my sheriff for now, obviously this great sheriff here, Wayne Ivey, and some others who are not really using the red flag law that's been offered to the sheriff's department in every state in Florida. But you've seen some that are abusing it, particularly in the Democrat South Florida counties, where it's been used sometimes over 1,000 or 2,000 times. And so it makes you ask the question, if 1 or 2,000 times we've stripped Floridians of their rights, shouldn't the rate of violence or crime dramatically drop? Or when there would have been way more crimes or murders before that? I mean, think about it. That's what we're doing is we're stripping these people because we said the threats to society. That's just ridiculous. Of course it wasn't. So it's being abused. People are being stripped of their rights. And I think if elected officials in Tallahassee realize that, I think the potential and the appetite to get rid of the red flag law will occur. I'm a co-sponsor on the bill that Mike Hill filed in the Panhandle that gets rid of the red flag law. The appetite, I hate to say, isn't there right now in Tallahassee. It's too close to the Parkland incident where that law was passed. But I do believe we can educate the majority of the House reps and Senate and get that.
You're jumping all over the issues that we do plan to get to. Royce, you had a quick follow-up? Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Are you going to come back to red flag law?
Oh, absolutely.
Then I'll wait.
Okay, very good.
They already have a Baker Act. They don't need a red flag law.
We'll have a time for your questions coming up. Hang in there. While you're on school safety in Stoneman Douglas, Wayne, you were right. They reacted hastily. The smart move would have been a special session and craft a good law. We urged them to do that. We were ignored. In the law that they passed, there were infringements to the Second Amendment. Royce, your son, could have become a criminal overnight, and in fact maybe did.
He did, yeah, absolutely. He woke up the morning that Governor Scott signed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act as a 20-year-old with the right to go purchase an AR-15. And I think it was like 3 o'clock that afternoon. He no longer had that right, according to Tallahassee. Now, according to the Constitution, yes, he bloody well did. But yes, he was. I took personal offense at that, and I butted heads with a local representative who shall not be named here, but about that, and challenged him to define the word infringed for me. And it seemed like he tripped over his tongue multiple times and wasn't able to do it. Infringed doesn't just mean broken or violated, because his response was, well, you can still buy him a gun. Well, federal law, no, I can't. And I said, it doesn't just mean broken or violated, it also means hindered. Look it up in the old 1828 Webster Dictionary. It's not just, the direct violation. Well, yeah, but you can still buy him one as a parent. Yeah, I know I can.
Randy the Rhino fine.
Please, if you would, hang on. I didn't either. But the whole idea is you would think Harvard would provide a better education than that.
Well, I will say this. There hasn't been a school child in America within the last 50 years who died in a school fire. Why? Well, because we mitigated that. We mitigated that threat called fire with something called water, the antithesis of it. We didn't just put fire extinguishers in every classroom. We pumped water throughout the whole school and sprinkler systems so that this threat reared its ugly head, it would just be extinguished immediately. Well, gee, so now we've got this problem with gun-free zones, which are also known as target-rich environments, and proof that gun control kills and doesn't save anybody. So what do? We put the antithesis of fire in our schools. How about the antithesis of a scumbag with a rifle? How about that? Let's put that in our schools. If that's what it takes. Oh, we can't be doing that. We can't be going to school in fear of this kind of stuff and gun violence. We're in fear of it now. We're already there. I still got a son in school. I shudder at the thought of someone going into his school and harming him or harming his schoolmates. It is still a viable threat. What are we doing sitting on our stinking hands?
Hand that microphone to your left for a minute, if you would. Representative Sabatini, we had the Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, and in those infringements on the Second Amendment, and we have made our schools just exactly as safe as Stoneman Douglas was the day it happened. One armed person in a school. It didn't work then, it's not working now. We've been promised a repeal of those Second Amendment issues. We're not seeing it. We were lied to by representatives, at least here in Brevard County, that we're going to put those provisions back in. They were there just so we could get the Safety Act passed. Is anything happening in the House, in the Senate, to get those provisions fixed?
Well, absolutely. The bill was filed last year by Representative Mike Hill.
Wait a minute. Mike Hill's bill is to repeal the whole School Safety Act, and everybody knows there is no appetite for that.
These specific gun rights infringements need to be removed by repealers or whatever. Is anybody doing that?
I do believe the bill he filed this year is more specifically tailored to those provisions. If not, we can have that conversation. It's kind of a technical issue, but I agree. And I'm for it, but we just need to have, a discussion with all the colleagues in the House to make sure the appetite's there. The truth of the matter is the majority of the House is so close to that incident that they don't feel like revisiting it yet. I'm not in that group.
Right.
I've co-sponsored it, very, very active on the issue, especially while this has become a contentious national issue. Now is the time to act and lead, and obviously shape the perception of the issue, but it's just not there yet. And so, I hope that activists around this great state of Florida can talk to the reps and persuade them, because they can be persuaded. All it takes is phone calls, a human voice, somebody talking to them about their understanding of what they want out of their rep can actually move somebody very significantly on an issue.
Sheriff, I saw you looking at me cross-eyed. I know you men and women who are working in our schools are doing a phenomenal job. And you know a kid that I know that would love to be in that role someday in his job with your agency. But they're handcuffed. You got one person, you and I both know, one person is not going to be adequate in many of these situations. Now, we've seen some where it's gone really well. Tell us your perspective here.
Well, first of all, there is no substitution for a uniformed deputy or law enforcement officer on a campus. There's also no substitution for 5 of them on a campus either. But the next best thing is to have as many people on that campus as you possibly can that are trained and ready to respond to that. And right here in our own backyard, we pushed to be able to arm teachers. We wanted to be able to get as many people as possible in there. And I'm going to tell you that there's a young lady standing right by that door over there, Tina Deskovich, who stood strong in the face of adversity and said, I want every possible person on the planet that wants to protect my child ready to protect my child. She never backed down. The anti-gunners targeted her, everything else, but she was unwavering in what her belief was, and that is, let's get as many people as possible to protect our schools. Let's, Royce talked about the, gun-free zones. That's an invitation. That's all that is saying, there's nobody here going to stop you from doing your carnage. There's nobody here that's going to stop you from doing your evil. And so we wanted to arm faculty members, the person that fixes the air conditioner, the PE coach, whatever it was, that was willing to do it. The irony of it is, we had, and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong on this number, but they did a poll to see how many people, 650 people that are already in our school board volunteered to do that. And we turned it down. So the opportunities are being missed. And just like the opportunities to stop Parkland were missed, these are opportunities that are being missed right now to stop the next Parkland. And we've got to get it fixed. You've got to start putting people, pulling the lever beside the name on the ballot that is going to stand up for the Constitution and protecting you. Don't lose sight of this fact, folks. Government's one and only responsibility is to protect its citizens. That's it. There's nothing else.
School employees hold concealed carry permits at twice the rate of the general population in this county, which is interesting. Kendra, you have anything on this issue in particular as we talk?
I'm not sure what I missed.
Oh, you didn't miss a lot. I'm sorry, I forgot you stepped out. We're talking about the school safety act.
Actually, if she voted, she'd been qualified to be a legislator.
Yeah.
I step out and miss stuff and still vote.
Yeah, exactly. Rob?
Very quickly, and now this is going to exclude Tyler, because Tyler was not a member of the Brevard County delegation when the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill passed. We already know that Tyler is a co-sponsor on the constitutional carry bill. This excludes Tom Wright because he represents a lot of North Brevard in the Senate. He was not a member at the time. But every member of the Brevard County legislative delegation at the time the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill passed voted for that bill. Every member. I look out here at this crowd tonight and I wonder how in the world, they ever thought that it would be a good idea representing Brevard County, Florida to vote for that bill. And as Bill mentioned, we were lied to essentially by one of those members that said that he would file, a bill to repeal it. And look, we're not going to call names tonight, at least not within our own Brevard County legislative delegation. Most of you will probably figure it out on your own, and I'm content to let you do that. This particular person, I'll never forget it. I was on my way to Volusia County for a meeting in Volusia County, and I called him and I said, "How are you doing with that bill to fix Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?" "Oh, I can't file it. I put it into bill drafting, and wouldn't you know it, Mike Hill filed it. It came out before mine went in, and so you can't have two of the same bill." Well, actually you can if you just change the language a little differently. So I knew that wasn't true. And then I said, "Well, why don't you sign on as a co-sponsor?" He said, "Well, I'm not signing on as co-sponsor because I've done that before, and then the bill gets amended, and then I end up being a co-sponsor on a bill that I no longer support because of the amendments." I said, "Okay, then why don't you file individual repealer bills for each of the individual egregious actions within that bill and try to repeal them one at a time? Mike's bill is all-encompassing, trying to repeal the whole thing." "Well, I really can't do that because I've got a 6-bill limit." I said, "No, you don't. You and I both know that repealers don't count towards your 6-bill limit that you can introduce in the House. You can file as many repealer bills as you want to." "Well, yeah, I just can't do it because they do the same topics as what's in Mike's bill." That's the kind of back and forth that takes place, and it's pretty disgusting, really. But we were let down.
Before we leave, school safety. There's one provision. This came from a caller on my show today, Anthony, after I was talking about our discussion and everything leading up to tonight's event. And he said, "What about the provision in the law that if your church has a school as part of its campus, and you go to church on Sunday, you can't carry a firearm to church on Sunday?" We see churches and synagogues, other houses of worship, attacked on a regular basis as much as schools are in this country. Can we get that one corrected, please?
Absolutely. I think that should be the low-hanging fruit, the easiest gun bill to pass, because it's really a property issue. And it's obviously a First Amendment religious issue. We're talking about churches. So let's be real clear, though. Right now, in the law, in my opinion, and I'm an attorney also, it's not illegal to carry on those campuses. But what Representative sought to do a couple of years ago when they filed it was to get rid of the gray area. Get rid of the idea that, okay, is this in the quasi-legal area of being in a church and a school when they got at the same time? We're going to get rid of it. So right now, I think the law is fine, but we do need to make it more clear. We do need to spell it out specifically and boldly in the law. So I support it. What happened with the bill was it was moving quite nicely along, like most gun legislation was before Parkland. It got stopped in its tracks when Parkland happened. And it was filed the following year, but because the Senate wouldn't take it up, they didn't move it. And so I believe someone else is filing it again this year. I'd like to, once again, have my 6-bill limit. Did get 2 Second Amendment bills, but right now we know the Senate's not going to move it yet. I think in the future can be optimistic. Once again, that's the easiest, most low-hanging fruit, and it's so ridiculous anyone could ever vote against it. We're talking about a property rights issue. Somebody is, if you are a member of a church and this is your church and you're on the board, how dare the government tell you you can't exercise your Second Amendment right? But once again, I think right now you certainly can, and I would encourage you to.
Sheriff, any enforcement plans on church campuses?
In Brevard? I feel pretty comfortable. I say attorneys with me on that too. So, Anthony's exactly right though. This is a property rights issue. And what's amazing to me is they want to tell churches and people that are going to churches and temples and synagogues and everywhere else that you can't carry, even though you're a concealed carry permit holder, lawfully can carry, you can't carry there. But yet Disney World can tell me I can't lawfully carry in there. So they've got it confused. They're allowing one group, and that's the deep pocket group, they're allowing one group to be able to say, no, you can't come in here, even though you have a lawful right to do it. You can't come in here, but they're stopping the other group from letting them come in. So I think it is completely a property right issue. This has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It is simply a property right issue. They could just as easily say you can't park a green truck at a church, and you would be bound by it. So I think you're exactly right on that.
Kendra Paris, red flag laws, risk protection order.
your area of expertise. We are seeing them, as Anthony mentioned, heavily used in South Florida, maybe sparingly used here in more Central Florida region. What are you seeing? What are you dealing with? And how are you dealing with it? What do you suggest for folks as they see this come up?
Okay, so the most common question that I get about the red flag laws is, should I, wink, wink, lose my gun in a boating accident at some point? Yeah.
Tragic boating accident.
Tragic manatee-related boating accident. I strongly recommend that you not do that, and the reason is manifold, but I would say that the primary reason is that you're probably going to lose the final hearing if they find out that you kept some of them after the ex parte. And if your ultimate goal is to have your firearms back, then you're going to have to play the game. And right now I do. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I kind of approach it like a game in a sense, but you're going to have to play by their rules. And right now the rules in place are the ones in this we drafted, 79401. Now the most frustrating part about this to me is that I'm not dealing with the state attorney. I'm dealing with the general counsel of the sheriff's department or the local police department. That's not their job. They're not supposed to be doing this. There's no proceeding like it in Florida. This red flag, like if you're getting a risk protection order, it's for the benefit of everybody in the state of Florida, right? You're trying to prevent. It's not like it stops at the county line. So we have a risk protection order in place. It applies throughout Florida. It's obtained on behalf of the state of Florida. And yet the state of Florida, that is the state attorney, is the one in court defending it and trying to get it. And instead, it's the local PDs and the sheriff's office. I don't know how much money they're spending on their lawyers to have to do this. The sheriff brought up another really interesting point that nobody's taking into consideration. And that's the pressure on the sheriff and on the local PDs to use the law because, hey, what if something happens and I didn't? And then the media is going to come down on me, and it's going to be, it's going to be circus. And so there are all of these moving parts and all of these collateral consequences that come about. There's the obvious due process issues. There's also all of these other things. The ex parte order is going to give law enforcement basic warrant authority to come into your home. What if they find something else illegal in your home? Well, if they didn't come there to find something illegal that can be used in court, so you've got collateral arrest involved. It's an expansion of police power, and people need to be aware of their rights with respect to it. Even if you're not a firearms owner, half of my clients have been people who don't have a gun. I never tried to purchase one, no evidence that they were online researching it, just why any city would spend resources on something like that is beyond me, but I could go on at length about
Let me ask you specifically on some of your clients without you naming them and getting into their cases. When they come in and they take the person's firearms, are they also taking their ball bats, their butcher knives, their kitchen knives, the saws in the garage? Are they taking other things that could be weapons?
Sometimes they are. They've gotten better about it when the law first came out because it doesn't say weapon. Again, everybody who's read Chapter 7 now, it gets a little bit technical. What's a weapon? Concealed carry laws. But, if my fixed blade is more than 4 inches long, then I've got to have a permit. I'm going to conceal carry. Yada, yada, yada. It's not for weapons, it's for firearms and ammunition. But at the beginning, when it was first coming out, they were taking knives, they were taking all sorts of things that just didn't fall under the law. Well, if you don't have a lawyer, what are you going to do about it, right? People don't know. They're up against a government entity, and that's another thing that I find so frustrating. A lot of these people don't have the money. Who has $2,000 lying around to hire a lawyer for a risk protection order? And who has the time to get on Google within 14 days and figure out how to handle an evidentiary hearing on their own behalf? It's problematic.
Well, just so you know, Sergeant Don Bennett, when he put us through our West Virginia State Police Academy class, was defining weapons for us, and our attempted murder would be called malicious wounding up there. And he said, for that crime to happen, he says you have to have a weapon. And he talked about his wife, whom he loved dearly, but was as big as the refrigerator. He said, if she picked up the refrigerator and hit me with it, it's a dangerous and deadly weapon. Anything can be a weapon, and that's what you run into here. I don't know if he got in trouble when he got home, but he was a funny instructor.
I can tell you the refrigerator has hurt me at points in my life. I don't know why y'all laughing. It's hurt some of y'all too. So before I answer what Tim said, I want to know, Bob, was it your idea to put me into 22 attorneys? What's next? Bring Blaze up here and say, hey, excited? Great. So, Kendra, and again, this is her field, and she's certainly the expert in this area, but I think she would probably agree with me on what I'm about to say. The red flag doesn't just impact the person that somebody has said is going to harm someone or somebody's having some mental health issues. It also impacts everybody else in that house, because if you're clearing that house out of all the firearms in there, what about the person that's there that now has no ability? Maybe the person's gone to Circles of Care or someplace like that, and they have no ability now to protect themselves in their own home. So it extends to a second and potentially a third party issue of being able to protect themselves. And then
Sheriff, is the problem not that we're attacking the implement and not the potential dangerous person?
Oh, but here's the problem, and I think Kendra will agree with me 1,000% on this. The problem is not anything to do with the Second Amendment. It's not anything to do with any of that. The problem is that the mental health system in this country is broken. Throw the baby out with the bath. That's the problem. You want to reform something, reform HIPAA, so that I can now see what a doctor has said about this person. Because right now, somebody in the back said Baker Act earlier. That person could be Baker Acted, and they can show up 3 days later, and I have no way of knowing what the doctor has even said about them. So you want to start working on something, and I promise you, Anthony probably just cringed when I said it, but you start talking about reforming HIPAA, and people cringe. But yeah, not Anthony, for all honesty. But the reality is, our mental health system's broken. We've got to fix it. We got to a point where it was more important to save money on mental health than it was to save lives. That's what happened.
Bob, I know you had some thoughts here.
I do. As long as we're talking about red flag laws, I want, Steve, can you put that slide up for me? Okay, so this is how absurdly this is being implemented across the state of Florida. Let me just stand up and turn around so I can see this. What we've got here are the top 10 counties in Florida for risk protection orders filed by all law enforcement agencies from the time the bill was enacted, March 2018, and signed into law, through November of 2019. The top county is not one of the South Florida counties. It's not Brevard or Dade or one of the most populous counties. It's Polk County at 554.
Now, I believe that. There's 503.
Hey, I hope you know I'm a Polk County resident, buddy. And I was crazy enough to put all these people on the same panel. But anyway, if you just take a look at this, the numbers are just staggering, because it doesn't make any sense that Polk would go from not needing red flag and RPOs to suddenly needing 554 of them. And I know from personal conversations that I've had with Wayne, Brevard County is roughly the same population as Polk County. Polk may have a few thousand people more than us. But here's the thing. County-wide in Brevard, it's been 40 versus 554. Wayne, is there blood in the streets in Brevard County? No. You would think if this thing was being judiciously implemented around the state of Florida, that there'd be blood in the streets in Brevard County right now, because we're not issuing enough risk protection orders.
I can say, the unincorporated areas, there's been 19.
Exactly. Those are not all Wayne's. Those include those that have been issued by police departments. And while we're on this topic, the Senate committee that's considering all these changes, Tom Lee's Infrastructure and Security Committee, one of the things that they're looking at is making it easier for people to get risk protection orders. Right now, the person has to go to a law enforcement agency and ask for one, okay, and then the law enforcement agency theoretically does an investigation and then goes to the court to ask for the risk protection order. There are people right now that think, and they're considering this as part of this Florida Senate effort, that think that just about any individual, any family member, any neighbor, anybody that works with you ought to be able to bypass law enforcement altogether and go straight to the court and put a petition in to get an RPO. So that takes law enforcement out of it. They don't even know what's going on until the judge says, here, Wayne, here's your RPO on this person. Go confiscate their gun. It's absolutely absurd. And then, of course, there's the due process issue. If they don't get due process, don't get a hearing before they're taken. There's all of those issues. And I'll stop.
Can I stand up too? I get big when I talk. Okay, so I love this part of the conversation. From a constitutional standpoint, you might have heard of standards of review. Like when you're talking about whether or not a law is constitutional, You've got rational basis review, which is the most lenient, but skipping all of that, I won't give you a primer on constitutional law, but with respect to firearms law, like protection orders, we're dealing with some form of heightened scrutiny, meaning the law doesn't just get to skate by the court. So are we dealing with strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny? It's not really been settled. We had that really weird case out of the first DCA that said, oh, strict scrutiny. It's going to be the hardest sort of law to get through, and then they didn't even bother to apply strict scrutiny. Well, one of the things about heightened scrutiny is that the government has to actually prove with facts that the interest that they claim behind the law is in fact supported by the evidence, right? So if they're claiming that we need a red flag law because it'll stop homicides or it'll stop suicides, you need to come to the table with the facts that that's true. It's been in place for a year and a half now. I've looked at the numbers for Polk. The overall suicide rate has gone up. The homicide rate has stagnated. There has been virtually no change except for a -1. I also want to point out the fact that more than 20% of that 555 are children who can't purchase a firearm in Florida anyway. 125 children who have a risk protection order. That is going to affect their ability to go to school. It could potentially affect their ability to go to the university they want to go to. A lot of the times it's for doing something stupid that teenagers do. And so I really want people to be aware. This is not just constrained to liberal counties. This is constrained to particular places where people are just letting it happen. So I'm really proud of everybody in this room because it seems like when you're motivated to make sure that it doesn't happen again here. But those are some of the facts about it. So I actually have a hearing on the 9th, just as in St. Lucie, about whether or not the government can actually prove that there is a substantial government interest with numbers, with facts. I don't think they're going to be able to do it.
We look forward to hearing about that. Royce Bartlett, I know you talk about red flag laws. It seems like a couple of times a month, if not more, on your show. Give us a brief synopsis of your thoughts.
You said brief.
Yes, sir.
Well, briefly, the goal of all gun control laws is confiscation. Period. It is. Whether it's piecemeal confiscation or wholesale confiscation, that is the goal of the enemies in our midst, is to confiscate our firearms. You look at the case where the gentleman who had RPO served on him, they took his firearms because he was being pretty wacky. But what Bill said earlier, why don't they take everything else? Why not the knives out of the kitchen? Why not the hammer off the pegboard? Because that man killed his mother right after they took his guns with a samurai sword. Why didn't you take that? It's not about public safety, it's about confiscation. Plain and simple. Why don't we just go ahead and pass a law, if passing a law is the answer, why don't we just go ahead and pass a law that outlaws gun control laws? How about that? We already have one called the Second Amendment, and the 14th Amendment. Those are gun control laws are absolutely illegal in every way, shape, and form. The way to deal with violent crime and violent scumbags is the vigorous exercise of the right to keep and bear arms. Here in Florida, some of y'all heard me say this on the program, from 1995 to 2012, the violent crime rate in Florida dropped by over 60%, and that's with adding another 1 million residents to the state, so it's actually more than that. Well, what took place between 95 and 2012? Well, in 87, when we passed concealed carry, the violent crime pendulum was swinging this way, and about 95 it started peaking because a lot of us started keeping and bearing, and that thing plummeted straight down, and it is still diving. That's how you deal with crime. Not with more guns.
In that regard, Anthony Sabatini, you are sponsoring, and Tyler Story co-sponsoring with you, constitutional carry and campus carry measures. Let's talk about those for a minute. Give us an introduction on what your bills are going to do and the kind of support you're seeing there.
Sure. Thankfully, unlike red flag laws, these are very simple bills. So one is campus carry. It literally just eliminates the provision in the concealed weapon permit statute that says you can't go to colleges or universities if you are a concealed weapons permit holder. So, and I filed that first, so it's actually inconsistent with what I wrote later because I'm obviously for that. But the bigger, better, and more important piece of gun legislation, which I think needed to be followed and needed to be talked about. We needed to challenge the Senate and every Floridian with is constitutional carry, and that's a moniker, like a shorthand name for basically a bill that says less gun control in general, but mostly two things: open carry. So the idea that if I do accidentally expose my firearm or whatever, you go to Texas and you go to these states that have open carry, people don't really open carry, but it should be illegal if they want to do it. And then the second part is permitless carry, which says, just like some folks on the panel said earlier, why are we buying our rights, our Bill of Rights, back from the government? How absurd is the idea that we needed a permit for free speech, a permit for the First Amendment? But it's okay to give somebody a permit for the Second Amendment? For me, it makes plainly zero sense. And if you frame it that way, people start to think the way you do too, but they've never heard it described in that way. We're permitting the Bill of Rights that the Founding Fathers have given us, and that are, we were, every born American is supposed to have it. So they're two very simple bills, and if you frame it right, it's what every American wants: less government.
How's it sound in Tallahassee right now as you look at going into the session this month?
It's tough, but I just think as long as we have reps who are pushing for these bills, having the conversations, and reshaping what people think, that as we come up, and me and Tyler are both freshmen, right? So I think there's a crop of Republicans coming in. We have a term-limited system in the State House here in Florida. As we move up, we'll have more influence, a little bit more significant power in the system. We can change these debates and hopefully win it over.
Reading between the lines, you've got 6 to 8 years to make this happen, and it ain't happening in the first one.
It's an uphill battle. Because
absolutely.
To give you a complete realistic breakdown, I could not find a senator to do a mirror bill in their body. Couldn't do it. And so if that happens, a lot of times the House leadership will say, well, I don't know why we want to really push or move a bill if the Senate's not going to move it.
Right.
And that's just kind of the way you do business. So, but having it filed, put the pressure on the senators. Now folks can actually go and ask their senators, why didn't you file that bill? Bill was filed in the House, can't use that as an excuse. Why didn't you file that bill? Any senator could have filed the bill. They get unlimited bills in the Senate.
We have one or two that represent Brevard, don't we? Just ask it. Sure.
Yeah, let me touch on open carry because Anthony's talking about it, and we're very proud of him for sponsoring that bill. Little known fact is that 45 other states have some form of open carry. 16 of them have permitless carry, but 45 states have a form of open carry. Only South Carolina, New York, Illinois, California, and Florida do not have a form of open carry. I don't want to join any of them in what they're doing. But the most interesting thing for me is a few years ago when we were working and I was testifying before the legislation and trying to get open carry passed. I happened to be up in Tennessee and I stopped by a gun store. It was my daughter and I, and we stopped by a gun store and everybody in there was open carry. And so knowing the answer, knowing that 45 other states, Tennessee being one of them, I just kind of engaged in a conversation with the store owner. And I said, hey, you guys have open carry up here, right? And his response to me pretty much puts it into perspective. His response was, no, man, you can't walk around with open beer up here. They'll put you in jail. I looked at my daughter and I said, that pretty much answers it, doesn't it? It's so commonplace. You know, people say it'll be the Wild Wild West and everything else. It won't be. All right? It will not be. I grew up in Florida. Most people don't realize it, but until I think 1987, Florida you didn't have to have a concealed carry permit. All right? In fact, I drove to school every day with a shotgun in the back glass of my truck. Yeah. And how many of you know that? Not once did I ever think about taking it inside because Coach McKay was in there with a big paddle that he was putting on my glass. And Mom and Dad were at the house waiting for an opportunity to beat me about something. So, we've gotten out of touch with what reality is. And when you have 45 other states that are doing it, it can't be that wrong. All right, so I think you stay on the course, man. Stay on the course.
Bob, I know that after we get our next round of questions in, you want to take questions from the audience if they have them available. How do you want us to do it? We have mics out there, or someone.
Steve is going to take a mic that's on a stand, okay, and he's going to move it towards the back of the room. It can't be too close to the front. And if you've got a question that you want to ask, then you just need to start lining up behind the mic that Steve puts out there.
Okay, while Steve does that, the questions will be taken from that microphone that you see walking toward the back of the room. If you have a question, sir, you might want to run back there. We've taken to legislating by constitutional amendment. It's been mentioned a couple of times tonight. Definitions tend to matter when that occurs. Yet when we passed, for example, the fellow voting amendment, now they're in court fighting over the definitions. They're changing the definition in a federal court battle, even though. I got matters here.
Did your mic die, Bill?
It's not used to a radio voice. They're changing definitions and fighting it out in federal court. Can we be assured the constitutional amendment is doing what it's supposed to do? And I think the answer is no. We know about steps in the legislature to change that, especially we can face a assault weapons ban, that type of thing. So, if you would in the back of the room, please. If you would in the back of the room, trying to hear him. Thank you. Anthony, how successful could we be in fighting and changing that? Are we stopping the constitutional amendment lawmaking? Do we have a shot at making that happen?
We're in much better shape with the court we have because we have a governor that actually shows true conservatives, unlike most governors past, some moderates up there. We have what's considered by many experts one of the most conservative state courts in the country. It's a 6-to-1 Republican majority. I shouldn't say Republican majority, I should say conservative majority. 2 of them just got moved up to a federal appellate level, but they're getting replaced by, I can assure you, 2 similar conservative justices. So any amendment, I think, will be interpreted favorably. But once again, I think as citizen activists who love the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights, we need to make sure we shape the perceptions in the eyes and minds of our lawmakers to get the best laws we can get created before we go to the Constitution. Not that I don't support it, I do. It's just a harder route.
Yeah, Bill. Well, we got time back here, but I guess that maybe that. What do you want, Bob? You want this mic back here? You want it up there? What do you want to do? Keep it here. Ask questions. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen of the panel up there, I'm a Marine, and we tend to eat crayons and actively, energetically engage the enemy. I like Sheriff Ivey's proposal that we need to be more active and energetic. But when we get together in a group like this, we are literally preaching to the choir. At the same time, we talk about engaging our legislators, while the other side is eating our lunch by all this emotional stuff that they put online and on newspapers and on TV ads.
Excuse me, Matt, watch here just a moment. We've got a lot of people that want to ask.
I'll get to it. Why can't we? I'll get to it. Why can't we put together PSA-like TV and radio ads that publicize crime statistics like the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, which shows that murder rates are down to almost lowest level in 50 years? And why can't we publicize actual cases of people who have defended their homes?
Okay, we understand the question. Thank you for the question. Let's get some answers here, Bob. Your group is active in doing this kind of thing. Let's let you answer it first.
Of course, if you're talking about a PSA that's going to be free, that's one thing. Okay, so that would be then just a function of sending the information and trying to put it in a format that would be acceptable to a media outlet that would do it. But again, all of these things when it comes to media and buys and those kinds of things, it's expensive. I mean, it's very, very expensive. So that is one way to go. But I especially like the aspect that you mentioned of it possibly being a PSA, public service announcement. So we should probably look into that.
Yeah.
Sheriff, yeah, you got one. Grab that microphone down there, Sheriff, if you would.
So, one of the things that we have to do is, I go back to what I said in my opening statement, and that is, we've got to start being vocal. If you go back to the battle that we fought at the school board, The only people that were showing up down there to fight and voice their opinions were the people that were in opposition to what we were doing. Everybody else was sitting at home going, well, that just makes perfect sense to me. I mean, common sense would tell you that if you got trained people on the campus, they can help protect it. Well, common sense really isn't that common anymore. So what we have to start doing is getting out there and not sitting at home. We got to start getting out there and being a voice. We got to start showing up and talking.
Just as a quick notice to you folks, we've got about 10 minutes for questions here, so please directly do a question, and then we're going to have to break up.
I'll keep it short.
All right. Next question.
Okay, mine's real short. What about RPOs? What about passing guns to someone else during an RPO? And I don't mean it legally. What I mean is if an RPO is being served, is that option available and does anything situationally about the person that you want to pass it to affect that?
Thank you for asking that. It's very vaguely worded, but yes, in fact, you can. Somebody asked me about this in the back. You can pass your firearm on, or firearms plural, onto somebody else. You know, you basically kind of have to prove the chain of custody. You've got to make sure that the law enforcement officers know that you've actually moved all of your firearms to the other individual, that it's an individual who is legally allowed to have firearms, but you can do it. The very interesting question is when they get them against children, right? The guns don't belong to the child. So, I mean, they're supposed to basically pinky promise, the parents are, that they keep the firearms away from the children, but there's nothing written into the law that requires a parent to lock their firearms if the child has an RPO.
What about adults instead of just children?
Same thing.
Okay.
No requirement that you lock the firearm away from the person who has the RPO, just supposed to state to the law enforcement officers, I promise I'm not going to let them have it.
All right, thanks, Kendra. Next question? All right,
Really quickly, because we're losing a lot of people. If you guys have questions about the RPO law and you want to email me, I don't have enough cards for people. My email address is simple. It's info, I-N-F-O, info@harrislaw.org. Harris has 2 R's, just like Harris Island, Report, Depot, South Carolina.
real quick.
Just go ahead and yell, I'll reiterate it for the mic. Go ahead.
Move a little bit closer. The question is, I'm not an owner of guns, but I'm an executive on a trust for NFA weapons. And inside the trust, it says that they cannot, if something by law, I just am illegal, they can't really take away the weapons from me since I don't own them. I have to be removed from the trust and someone else takes my position. Now, if they get removed from my house, I mean, if they get confiscated for whatever reason, the red flag law, does this trust oversee that? Or they could be given another executive to put on this?
The question is on trusts and red flag law, Kendra.
Nobody has any earthly idea.
Which is just like the legislature when they passed Stoneman Douglas. Next question, please.
Next question. No, hold on, let's go. Keep it quick.
You said you're not a gun owner. This is Brevard County. You want one?
Very quick, very quick. Number one.
Okay, Bob.
Can we get the NRA involved?
Hang on, let's let Bob get to it.
Bill, to answer your question directly about phone numbers and those kinds of things, we've got some action items at the end of this, and we want to get through these questions really quickly.
Just put them on the website, Bob. Put them on the website.
Don't worry about it, Bill. We got to go.
All right.